Hi Flosstube. My name's Jody. I'm Trixie Tricycle here on YouTube and also on Instagram. And today I'm doing a Flosstube Extra and a product review for Caroline at Evertote. And I'm going to be reviewing the Hearthside Craftworks Mark II floor stand. That's a mouthful, but it's a really good product. So I was at Stitch North and in April, and she had some floor models set up near where my table was. I use scroll frames almost exclusively when I'm stitching, and the floor stand that I have been using is adequate-ish, but and it's not a knock. It's one that I bought on Amazon a couple of years ago, and I've made it work, but I've been definitely interested in investing a little bit more energy and looking for something that would be more appropriate for the size of projects that I tend to work on. So as an example, this is one of my recent starts. This is MT 1810 by GGR, and it is these bars. These are Millennium frame bars, and they are 40 inches wide. And so the work itself is over 2 feet from border to border. And finding a floor stand that will accommodate that and make it easy to flip over and still have access to all of your work was a little bit of a challenge. But she and I had a conversation at Stitch North about whether or not they would work, and she wasn't sure. She uses Omnique frames and also just uses the scroll bar that is incorporated into, because the Mark II is actually it's a scroll frame in and of itself. So and I'll show that as I'm demonstrating. But she hadn't used Millennium frames before, and Millennium frames are made by a company in the UK called Needle Needs. It's a small, I think, family owned. They hand make all of the products, and you might have seen on Hands Across the Sea, Nicola uses them pretty frequently, so when she's showing her projects, you'll see those. And they are built slightly differently. As you can see, the sides, so the top, the width, these are the bars, and these are the stretchers. So this is what causes the fabric to expand, causes the bars to move away from each other, and gives you that tension that you want, or you can loosen them. So they're a little different because not only are they round, but the threading is wooden. And so I had some concerns about how the stand would clamp on, how it would connect, and whether or not, and Caroline's concern are these going to be too heavy for the spring mechanisms on the side of the Mark II stand? So she reached out to me over the summer and asked if I would be willing to kind of field test the floor stand. And since I had already planned on ordering one anyway, I was more than happy to do that. So I've had it for, I want to say I've had it for a little over 2 months, and have been testing it pretty rigorously. I've gotten a lot of stitching done, and I love it. I love it. First of all, it's like a piece of furniture, so it's really nice to have in the house. It's not, I don't feel like I'm kind of taking over a room with crafting, which kind of feels like that for me when I'm using, it's one thing if you can just you're working with a Q-snap, or you're working with a hoop or something where it just feels a little bit smaller, like you're taking up less sort of footprint. I don't like to leave things out. So like having an extra table or like a side table where I've got all of my like little stitchy stuff out in the house. I have dogs, and I just don't want them to get into needles and things like that. And so I tend to want to keep things pretty, I want to keep my work kind of tight. And this is actually really useful in doing that, because it's got enough accessories where I've got my my chart, I have a little work tray that I can keep all my things, and it just fits really nicely around my furniture. So I took a few photos, and you may have seen them at the beginning in the intro. The setup that you see up there, it's a pretty big reclining chair, kind of a chaise, and that with the crossbar on the back of the stand is 48 inches wide. And I'll talk about that as I'm going through each of the parts. But I also have just a regular kind of just a really standard chair with an ottoman that the standard 36-inch wide crossbar slides right into just fine. And so it's much more comfortable. Usually when I'm down here working in my office, I'm sitting in an office chair in my craft room. And again, which is fine, but I've found that it's a lot more comfortable for me to be able to just work. So yeah, I'm going to just go through each of the parts. I'll show you what I was using before and some of the downsides of that, and then I'll go ahead and show you the details of the Mark II floor stand. So anyway, thanks for checking in and watching. I'm going to put all the details in the drop down below so that you can see where the website is. And again, it's Evertote, and Caroline and John, her husband, purchased Hearthside Craftworks, I believe it was last year, and worked directly with the previous owner so that John could learn how the previous owners had built and designed and had been building these beautiful stands forever. So Caroline's had hers for a while, and when they found out that that couple was going to be retiring, they reached out, and so they're keeping it going, and it's really, really cool. So if you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully I'll be able to cover this pretty thoroughly, and I'm just going to, it's really easy. First of all, when you get it, you're not going to need any special woodworking experience to be able to put it together. You need one tool for the floor stand, and most people would have one hanging around. So I'll show you all of that, and I'm just going to go ahead and kind of get things readjusted and set up, and we'll go from there. So this is the current setup that I have been using. I'm going to try and sort of stay out of the frame a little bit because it's going to cut me off anyway, but I've been using this for some time. It's a relatively low, kind of lightweight floor stand that I picked up on Amazon, and the way that it functions is that it's got these two pegs on these two arms that can be adjusted, and then your piece on a scroll frame just sets down onto those pegs. So, it works reasonably well. In order to flip your work over so that you can tie off the ends, you've just got to flip it to the opposite side. I use a floor lamp with a magnifier, so sometimes that, it's almost a two-part. Lift the floor lamp, flip over the work. And this tends to work okay. The hardware isn't super high quality. It tends to loosen up pretty frequently. It's got some adjustability when it comes to the height, but when you're looking at the way that the legs are set up, it's just you've got one position that they can be in. If it's flipped around, if I turned this the other way, it would be too top heavy and it would cause this to topple over. So you're limited in what you can do in terms of, putting an ottoman down in front of you, being able to sort of stretch your legs out or whatever. So I typically, if I'm using this, I'm sitting downstairs in my office chair, and I'm limited to, one sort of spot that I can work. It also helps because I'm right next to my desk so that I can actually, have a little spot. This is an inexpensive IKEA it's really a tablet stand, but I use it for my charts. Sometimes I'll have two of them, and so I'll put, you know, my phone or whatever if I'm watching Flosstube. But it's all, you know, sort of fragmented pieces that are in different places. And the big concern, or the thing that it really does not allow me to do, is if I'm working on a large Millennium frame, so a really wide piece. So I showed this in my last video. This is GGR, this is MT1810, and these bars are 40 inches wide, which is, granted, it's very large, but this is the size of the project. And so if I wanted to set this on here, typically it's going to end up, like, I'm kind of holding it up, I'm watching it because I don't want it to fall over. And if I get to one side or the other, which sometimes you have to because these bars are directly behind your work, you've got to shift over to one side or the other of these crossbars, and so it ends up, I have to either rest it on a table, one side on a table. So as you can see, functionally it's not awesome for larger pieces. And this is just not the kind of thing that I can, you know, I can move it around the house if I want to, but it really doesn't fit up against any of my furniture just because of the way that the legs sit. And then I have to track a whole bunch of stuff up with me in order to have my floss and everything else that I need with it, because there's no room for any kind of accessory tray or anything. So this was starting point. So I was looking for something that was going to be an improvement. So I'm going to reset here for a second, and we'll go ahead and put together the Hearthside Craftworks Mark II floor stand together, just so that you can see all the different parts and how they work together. Normally I would have this set up upstairs, but because I'm filming, I've got everything moved down here. So it's going to take a little trial and error to make sure that we can actually get everything visible so that you can see exactly how it is set up. But bear with me, I'll be right back. Okay, so first of all, when you receive, stand by. Okay, so starting with the legs, you're going to receive all of these things in the package or in the box when it's shipped to you. The legs are actually going to be in two separate pieces, and that's because these knobs here, which you can see from the side, hold the two pieces in place so that the height can be adjusted up or down. So I currently have them on, I believe this may be the highest setting just because of the height of the furniture that I have in my living room. But it's really easy to put these together. Everything is attached with the exception of one joint on this, and I'll show you that in a moment. But everything is attached with just an easy sort of pre-threaded knob, and you don't even need to tighten it down too much. It's just you're adjusting the height, and so that's what those are for. So you'll get two sets of legs. And when I first got this and set it up, I actually put the legs on backwards, but they work a little better for me with the Millennium frames. But you can set them up either way. So either set them up so that the wheels are away from you, which is the more standard way that the website will show, and the crossbar fits in here, or you can do what I did and you can have it so that the wheel is closest to you, which really doesn't make a difference in how you're able to adjust it or move it away from you as you're sitting. And what that does for me is it puts the weight of the frame a little bit back, and so that it's centered right over the middle line of the leg support of the foot. So this is the way that I have it set up. And in the photo that I'm going to insert it periodically, a couple of different photos so that you can see in a larger scale how I've got it set up. So you will need a tool just for one connection, and that's for attaching the crossbar. So you either can use a socket if you want. You don't need to ratchet down on it hard at all, but you'll need a 7/16 or an 11 millimeter. They're pretty close to each other depending on what tool sizes you use, whether it's metric or American Standard. So I've got a 7/16, and this is the crossbar that comes standard with the Mark II. I also have a longer crossbar, which is what you've seen in the photo, that will accommodate the 40-inch crossbar, and I'll show you why in just a few minutes. But for down here, because it's smaller, I'm going to show you the standard size, which is I believe that this is a 36-inch wide. So it can accommodate up to a 28-inch wide bar. Because you need 8 extra inches if you're going to have the clamp mechanisms, which I'll show you in just a moment. But just keep that in mind. So the bar that I'm installing is a 36-inch wide, and that's the standard crossbar piece that comes with the floor stands. So each end of the crossbar has pre-threaded bolts. It has a washer, and then it's got a little nut that fits over the top of that. The washer goes on the outside of the leg. So, and I always drop hardware. I don't know about you, but I always drop hardware. So that fits. And you can do this by yourself, but sometimes it's nice to have a helper. But I just sort of hold up this end. Washer goes on first. Just finger tighten them for now to get it in place. Washer goes on, and this just protects this exterior wood. Now, one thing that I did that it's not a huge deal, but it may make a difference in the width of your furniture, is that I just placed it so that the knobs are on the inside, and I don't want it that way. So I'm actually going to flip these legs around. Okay, so when you're installing the legs, I like to have the knobs on the outside, on the exterior, so that it's not going to interfere with the width of your chair if you're trying to slide this into a chair. And also it just makes it a little more accessible if you wanted to adjust the height once the crossbar's on. Then you can have access to those bars on the exterior. So again, I've got mine backwards compared to the way that the website might show, but Carol and I have talked about it, and it's not going to damage the stand. It's not going to create any problems when you go to put on your accessories. So, washer goes on the outside of the leg, and you've got your bolt or your little nut that fits over the top of that bolt. And just finger tighten it for now. Okay, so that's the first side. And I'm just going to kind of hold this up in place. Washer goes on the outside of the leg. So like on anything, you don't need to over tighten any of the hardware. And that's how you end up stripping things or kind of crushing things out of space. So when I'm using this wrench, I'm really only just getting it so that it's barely tight. I'm not torquing down on it like I was going to be attaching an engine block or something. Doesn't need that much. So I'm just tightening it to the point where I get a little bit of resistance. And if you find that it's wobbling back and forth, or you're hearing, you know, which you really shouldn't, but I just have it tightened just enough. Same thing here. So I'm just using a little socket, and just until it's tight, and it really doesn't take that much at all. So don't force it. So now what I've got is this is the basic framework of the floor stand. So I've got the crossbar this way. So this is again 36 inches wide, and then my legs are facing inward. So now I'm going to attach some of the accessories. The first thing that I am going to do is to put on, in order for this to hold on to a Millennium frame, which is, this is closed right now, but in order for it to hold on to a Millennium frame, I need to be able to fit these, or one of the top one, into the clamp. So I'm looking at how wide this is going to be on my, right? So I can get a little bit to either side, but basically this will allow some adjustability of where I place it on the crossbar. So, like all of the accessories, it comes with these knobs. I like to have it so that, and this is actually, I'm going to show the full construction, because I've already got these clamps pre-installed. But if you were to just use the regular scroll rods that come with the stand, which you can, you wouldn't need to have those clamps. But because I'm specifically showing you how I use it with the Millennium frame, that's why I had them pre-staged that way. The stand comes with its own scroll rods. So you've got a pre-made set of scroll rods that have a piece of strap that's attached to the bar itself, and this is where you would baste your fabric. So because I have other options when it comes to my scroll frames, and because a Millennium frame is set up very differently than this, I typically don't use these. But if you were to use them, all you'd have to do is put one here. Stand by. So now I've got the crossbars ready to go. And now I can see that it is indeed at the very last hole. And I'm going to connect with this knob. And it's just ready tidy. I would just hand tighten it for now. So if you look at the back, you can see that this armature, there is a little bit of a threaded bolt that's right here. That's where you would connect to this. So again, just using these knobs and just hand tighten it. Doesn't need to be too tight. And then when you have your fabric in place, this whole mechanism flips over so that you can get to the back side of your work. So again, you would baste on your fabric to both sides. So a lot of people do that. The challenge with this, and for me, is that because I'm working on a lot of different projects at the same time, every time you need to swap out, you would need to either unbaste it, or you would have to come up with some kind of an alternative method of connecting your fabric to this piece of strap. So typically I don't use these. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the scroll bars. And then I can show you typically what I will do. So once again, because I'm actually going to be using these clamps in conjunction with the sides, with the swing arms, I'm going to install those now. So if this is where I'm going to be placing, let's put that over here so you can see it. If I was going to be placing that here, I'm going to install, and you can see that these clips basically have little pegs so that it holds it into place. So I put this on the second to highest, if you can see that, the second to highest hole, because that gives the pegs room to fit in, and then attach it. Okay, so this is a Millennium frame. A couple things that you'll notice about it is that it's got on either side of the bars, it's got a rectangular piece, and if you were to put pressure inward on this, it's not going to hurt it. If I were to try and clamp it and press inward on this, it could damage the wooden threading mechanism, because these are what stretch or loosen the fabric and expand or contract the two bars away from each other. So Millennium frame has the Needle Needs, which is the manufacturer of Millennium frames, has some specifics on how they should be stored, how they should be handled. So what I really like about it is that the pressure is not pushing in on the center. Not to mention that the clamps wouldn't work very well because these sidebars are round. So when you look at the clamp, your Millennium frame fits right into this clamp. So when I'm measuring where I'm going to place this on the crossbar, I place one side of the frame, hand tighten it down, and then I bring it over. Let's see if I can do this. Then I bring it over to the other side, slide that in, and then I can see which space this is going to go into. And I kind of like to give myself a little bit extra because I can always move the frame just a little bit out to the ends of the clamp. So now I've got it in position. I typically will slide the Millennium frame so that it's all the way down at the bottom of the clamp itself, and then just give it a tighten. I haven't had these come loose while I'm stitching, but a recommendation, if you don't get a super tight fit on the interior of that clamp with your frame, you can add a little piece of wool or something like that to provide it with a little bit of friction so that it will hold it in place. The knobs themselves, you don't want to over tighten those because you can strip out the hardware, and so I would rather have something, a little wedge, a piece of wool, something in between there that you could sandwich in, rather than trying to tighten it even harder, because at some point you're not going to be able to get any more tightness out of this. So you would want to put a piece of wool in there. So once both arms are connected and I know what the width is, it's very easy for me, and this is getting adjusted because I'm tightening it, So readjusting, making sure everything is where I want it to be. So now you can see that on this side, you've got the ability without grabbing onto the frame itself, which again, if I were to be pushing up and down on the frame, I'm putting stress on this. I'm putting stress on that, the thread mechanism, and I would imagine it's the same for the Omnique. And so that's why I always use the crossbar to rotate. But the good thing is now I've got full rotation. I can get all the way to the back of my work. Now I can't make it flip. Doesn't need to do somersaults. I just need to be able to get to the back of the work, and it's more than sufficient to do that. So if we flip over and look at the back, look at it in profile, you've got this bar now with a variety of different spaces where I can add accessories. And Caroline was nice enough to send along a different, sort of a variety of accessories that would fit on there. So to begin with, and what I use the most often, is my, this is a chart stand. So I like having that kind of centered behind my work. So it's got a ton of movability. You can see that it's got a really good pivot. This is what will go into the crossbar behind the frame itself. So, and again, it's got, you know, I can flip it around. And what I like to do is have the knob on the back side. So, if you can see this, I'm just positioning this. And again, kind of like the sidebars, it's got those two little knobs right here that hold it in place so it doesn't pivot. So I slide that in there. It's got another knob. And you just tighten that in place, and then you can either, you can move the chart closer or further away. I like to have it a little bit further away, but you'll notice that there is a little bit of hardware now on the interior of where your work is going to flip over, and so you always just want to double check, and I'm going to have plenty of clearance so it's not going to get in the way. And part of the reason for that is you can see I've got my Millennium frame shifted pretty much to the bottom of that clamp. Now, it can be centered, so you could move it a little bit higher, but that's typically it's kind of just the standard, just to keep it even both sides. So I've got my chart stand here. Something else that I love is the tray. This is for your accessories. So another accessory that you can place would be a tablet stand. So once again, it fits right back into the crossbar, and then it's just got adjustability so that your tablet can fit in like that, and then it just tightens down. So people that work with Pattern Keeper, this makes it really easy. And using the same base, you could also attach, if instead you want to just have your phone where you can watch, you know, if you don't have a tablet and you want to just use your phone, they also have the option to have a phone stand. So, chart stand, tablet holder, tray, and phone stand are all some of the options, and those are all available. So at this point, you've essentially got a really nice, comfortable, I'm going to pivot the camera just a little bit here so you can see the whole thing. So this is it, all set up and ready to go. It's very easy to use with a Millennium frame. It holds it in place. You can get full access to the back, and I love it. So what they did for me, so they made for me a custom width crossbar that is 48 inches wide. And that accommodates, if you can see the sides, so in addition to having the flip mechanism attached into the back of the crossbar, you need a total of 8 inches in addition to the width of your Millennium frame, or whatever frame that you're holding onto with this, with the two crossbar mechanisms. And so because I have a 40-inch wide, which is what I showed you earlier for my GGR chart that I'm working on right now, you need it pretty large. But the so this is a custom piece, and this is something that I think this is the largest that they can make, and it's difficult for them to find stock that they can make these out of that don't crack, that stay straight. So I'm really grateful that I have this, because it has made it so easy for me to be able to do the work on a large piece like that. But that's the outside. Those are the outside perimeters. And so the nice thing about it too is that, as you notice, Millennium frames aren't super heavy, but this does not fall at all. And on this one, with the large 40-inch, it doesn't either. So it's got this really nice spring-loaded mechanism on the side that you can adjust, but I haven't had to adjust at all. And so that just keeps these two pieces connected, and it's not going to fall on you when you're working on it. So it's fast for me to be able to work with two hands. And the good thing too is that if you have, you know, a lot of times I use 103s, so I usually will use the little work tray on the larger one, because I've got more space to accommodate it, just to hold like a, you know, I'll hold my 103s in one of these little makeup holders, and that just kind of keeps them where I need them, along with a little Ort tray, and that's got my threader, a little pair of scissors, and so that's helpful to have that. But the cool thing is, if you're using something that is on a floss drop and you put your threads over here, let's see if I can do it on this side. So if I have my threads over here hanging and I want to keep them, if I pivot, they're not going to move, because they're out here on the end that is staying stationary. So it's only this interior portion that pivots. But again, it stays in place. So all the parts are beautifully made. I feel like it's nice for me to be able to sit up in my living room and be able to just stitch up there, and I can look out the window, and I've got more space and room, and I feel more social, and I'm not just sort of down here. But it's also, I mean, this piece here in the background, this Marianne Kopp, was so fast to stitch because for all of the above reasons. Anyway, I want to thank John and Caroline for sharing this with me and allowing me to test it out. So highly recommend. I would contact Evertote if you have any other questions about it. And feel free to ask any questions in the drop down. And that's pretty much what I have. So 10 out of 10 would recommend.